Hi there. It's the Lean Into Artcast, a show where a couple of visual storytellers engage with visual storytelling topics. And how do we engage with it? Well, first we examine its physical data. We look at it. What does it look like when we're engaging with this type of thing, with this topic, whether it's like making stuff or the lifestyle of making stuff. And then after that, we back out and examine what is the meta information. How do we think about this stuff? When we're engaging with this stuff. And we think really hard about visual storytelling, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I am a cartoonist and a teaching artist. The other host is...
Hi, I am Rob Stenzinger. I am a designer and coder and, fellow podcaster with you.
I always forget to say podcaster.
Yeah,
That's what we're doing right now.
It's a thing. We do this thing.
So I hear.
Yeah. Like over 6 years, right? For me, like you, it's like...
Oh, don't remind me.
Super duper,
We live in a youth-oriented culture, Rob. Don't remind me.
We do.
How long we've been doing...
Yes. No, we are just getting started. Just learning this thing. We are just, learning happens all the time, but just don't check the calendar and the feed.
You know what? But maybe having some experience in doing stuff will provide us with some insights as we engage with and explore a topic this week. And this time we decided to talk about, this was actually suggested by one of our Patreon supporters, work-life side project balance. Right? Odds are, if you're listening to this or watching this, you are somebody who makes things to communicate in some kind of visual way, whether you are a coder like Rob, or a cartoonist like me and Rob, or a teaching artist like me and Rob. These are things that take time. It takes a long time to develop a lesson plan. It takes a long time to make even a mini comic, relatively speaking, right? It certainly takes a long time to make a game. These are big commitments. And these kinds of commitments have to also run parallel to leading a life, a healthy life, emotionally healthy, physically healthy, hopefully. And presumably also in the pursuit of, keeping food on the table and roof over the head, doing some kind of activity to engage in trade so that you can continue existing. It's a lot of demands to put on a body, Rob.
Yep. And it's not just the I think you framed it up really well, where you've got the frame up of commitments, and then it's almost that kind of anticipating the challenge, the sort of somehow that act of maintaining these different concerns. How do you make all that happen? How, like, what does it feel like as far as when it's not all happening? And then, I guess we're just going to sort of, explore some examples of what that's been like for us, and then also, and something that honestly, like, this is what we do. We share a lot of strategies about this stuff that, like getting into a position where you have reasonable expectations about your project and all that, easier said than done. But this kind of thing comes up thematically.
I
probably on every podcast I'm a part of.
You wouldn't happen to be talking about the Art and Science Punks podcast that you also participate in.
Yeah, that's true. You beat me to the punch in mentioning it, but yeah, it's very much a factor. Because I happen to do that podcast with Kate Shields Stenzinger, and that's she's my life partner, and so like we're dealing with that in a variety of areas of concern. Being parents and having day jobs and the desire to do the side projects. So it's funny when this kind of question comes up. It's almost like I almost feel like I'm never not talking about it. In a way, like, how do you keep that going, right?
I would like to submit for consideration is that I think a big reason for that is I personally feel like it's something that um, is it's the aspect of the work that we do that can only be managed. And when I say manage, that means that there are times where I'm going to be good at managing it and times I'm not going to be so great at managing it. I don't feel like this is something where I've ever found a rock solid, surefire, money back guarantee system that helps me prevent things from becoming imbalanced, right? For further context for this episode, right now at this particular point in my life, I feel like this is something I'm not doing a great job of managing. Not to turn into chest beating by my own fault, by my own great fault, but more to say that this is fresh in my mind, and it's something that I am sort of trying to remanage right now. So that's where I am, and I know this is a place I've been before. Right? I feel like this is something that just is it's an ongoing part of the gig.
It is. I mean, it's this is that sort of background radiation at the very least when folks are gathered around, like, oh, let's listen to the commentary track of how other people are making stuff, and I'm wondering if I'll glean some interesting tidbits from that, or at least share some common ground and be like, well, it sounds like they're dealing with similar constraints and issues that I'm dealing with, and so, well, I'm not alone, at least.
Right. Well, I mean, because that's a big. I was just talking with a student today. I've got a student in one of my classes who is actually from a bit of a ways out of town, which was incredibly, like, just surprising and so reassuring to, like, see a kid whose parents are that supportive, where they drive them, like, way out of town to come to take a comics class. And I was expressing my gratitude to the parent, saying, like, when I was growing up, I was in a very rural area, and I had almost no signal letting me know what it took to do what I want to do when I grow up. I knew from the time I was 11, I want to make comic books. How do you do that? I got to reverse engineer what I'm seeing here. I don't know. My library certainly didn't have How to Make Comics the Marvel Way, and they certainly didn't carry comic books. This is the 80s. So, like, I was trying to give this parent some, like, idea of what it meant to me as a arts instructor and a comics instructor, that they're being that supportive of their child. But I mean, this is all to say is that, like, sometimes when we're making stuff, and we come across, like, frictions, and if we don't have any kind of extra signals out there along the line of what we're facing, we can come to the conclusion that I must be doing it wrong, right? So that's,
well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly, yeah, you're encountering a circumstance where it doesn't feel good, and for whatever reason, and then that you can certainly try to gain insights, jump to conclusions, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So do you want to dive in and start sharing some stories about times when it was out of balance, and how do we get back in balance? How do we learn balance?
Yeah. Okay. Let's do this.
All right, let me find some good music to get us a transition to the on the ground section. How about something that's a little bit jazzy? As we get ready to go on the ground, where we talk about how we engage with the topic. What does the topic look like when we're doing it? Like, if this was an art demo, this would be the part where I break out a sheet of paper and start drawing in front of you, right? Rather than talking about the fundamentals of drawing. So, okay. Now we're on the ground, Rob. You have some examples of when you fell out of balance?
Lots. I honestly, I don't know what balance really feels like, other than being okay with the current circumstance, right? Where I honestly, like, I really worked pretty hard to come up with like life management systems kinds of things in my 20s, and I was like, oh, I think if I categorize stuff in certain ways, and if I get all the stuff out of my head and I manage it and whatever, yeah. Anyway, so, but I mean, so my expectations have changed, but like, but still, the tensions and the forces persist. At a time where I expected to be able to manage all these different categories and keep some kind of equilibrium among them, I was in a living situation where I was rooming with a friend temporarily, and I had sort of it was already as my professional life had been in, but I sort of was I left a relationship and was doing my own thing for a little while, and was you know needing a place to stay. Super generous friend made an arrangement, but I crammed all my stuff into one room, right? Like, this was, and I probably had both like mentally, physically, and possessionly like too much stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was like for the most part in one room, and this was it was a feat of organization to make it all fit, but I made it fit. And it was one of those things where, as long as I didn't move too fast in any direction, probably okay, right? Well,
So this was not up to code. The scaffolding that you built in this room.
I don't think it was up to code. At the same time, I was juggling a day job. I was doing some side consulting, and I was, let's see, I had this ongoing commitment. I was jamming with a friend where we were like, maybe we were going to form a band and all this stuff. So all these different, main gig, side gig commitments, whatever. That's my living arrangement. One day, I'm like, I need a break. Talk with some friends, hey, let's go to mini golf. Cool. I go and grab, like, oh, got to get my wallet, whatever. I'm going to change my shirt, get ready. And as I'm leaving the room, I brush up against one object that wasn't as stable as maybe it could have been, right? And this object wobbles. It happened to have been a speaker. And then this wobbling object, it had a change jar on top of it.
Oh, no.
Okay, fine. Well, okay, fine. Change jar. What's the worst could happen if a change jar falls from about 5 feet up? Is that a big deal? I don't know. But as I'm exiting the room and I'm closing the door, I hear jingle, jingle. And I'm like, why is that moving? And that's a change jar. And I turn around and I see it tumbling off the surface it was on. Okay, fine. Right. And it's heading straight for this expensive laptop I bought to help support my consulting.
Oh, my God.
Side gig. Slow motion. I see the change jar hit the laptop.
Oh, my God.
And
this is before aluminum laptops too, right?
This is before aluminum laptops. This is and even an aluminum laptop, this change jar was packed. Like the rest of the room, everything was packed.
Yeah.
I just saw it. It's just over and over my head. Change jar, whack. Change jar, whack.
Hard
that
service. Hard service.
The
thing weighs like maybe 15 pounds. Mm. A little over 1 stone if you're in the UK listening, right?
That's the measurement they use, right? Oh my word. So I just was like, do I even look? What? Because I mean, it was I was in a good situation. I was able to be able to purchase this laptop because I was doing okay with this side gig, which actually ended up going sideways later, and I ended up getting owed a lot of money. But I met my commitments. But oh well. The laptop was ruined, right? Basically, sure. It's just like enough force where it was done, and it's like that was not a trivial expense, and it sucked. I mean, it was just based on I wasn't setting myself up to, anyway. And the metaphor I took from that is if I'm in a situation where there's no room there for flexing, right? And I think of it, the phrase I use is called when everything is touching everything. Something goes off in my head. Now.
Yeah.
Post laptop and change jar.
Oh, that hurts. But yeah, it's an awesome physical metaphor for, what it feels like when you're trying to pursue so many different things at once, right? It feels utterly packed in and you don't have room to move around between all the different things.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike your situation in terms of the physical space, like part of what makes this thing so challenging is once you start getting signals that you're needed or wanted in different arenas, it becomes really difficult to say no to things in time
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, because it's like it feels so good to be wanted and to have that feedback loop of like, hey, when I do this thing, people seem to enjoy it. Hey, it's becoming a rewarding experience. I should do as much of that as I can, right?
Oh, totally. And I mean, that's you just described, that's the packing process.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, at some point, then it's like, well, now it's all packed, and it gets really difficult to shift anything around.
When everything's touching, I'm gonna remember that.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, how about you? Is there an
I
example
got.
you
I
can
mean,
think of?
like you,
Um,
tons of stories, and some of them I know I've told on this show and in other places. I mean, like the time when I was, working a freelance, or I was beginning my freelance career as an illustrator. Plus, I was working a day job. Plus, I was drawing a mini series, my first mini series that I was very excited for. And over that period, it's like my life turned into, and gosh, we just talked about this with Greg Shigo recently. Like when you get into those kinds of like deadline zones, my life turned into, I got up at 6, took Ann to school. I went to work all day, come home. I would take a half-hour nap while Ann made dinner. I'd get up, we'd have dinner together, and then, maybe spend like another 45 minutes together. Then I'd go in my studio. She'd go, do other things in the apartment. And I would work until 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd sleep for 2 hours, and I'd get up and I'd do it all over again. This went on for months until I one day I came into work and I was like, boy, I feel kind of dizzy. And the next thing I know, I'm like surrounded by nurses. I fainted at work, and like I was
I
physically
don't
exhausted.
recall this story. That's super intense.
Yeah, it
Wow.
was. I didn't even see it coming. It was the kind of thing where it's like when I was driving to work that morning, I was like, boy, I feel funny. I feel kind of weak. I feel kind of like I can't. And it wasn't like feeling tired the way like when you think of feeling tired, where it's like I'm
Mm.
sleepy. It was more like I felt fatigued. Like I couldn't move my arms as all that much. Like when you lift something that's beyond your strength, right? You're
Mm.
lifting. You're like, I can't do it anymore. It felt like that just to like hold onto the wheel of the car. Um,
Wow.
and then yeah, I got into work and I was like, hey, I feel kind of funny. Like I just as I walked in the front door and like I'm at the receptionist desk, I'm like, I feel funny. And then the next thing I know, I'm like laying on the ground. I don't even remember falling down. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, that was like a sign, like, hey, unsustainable situation. And this is the part in retrospect that I think about more than I think about me getting sick is I know I've told recently, my cat of 19 years passed last August, and while it's been some months, grief is a funny thing, and it still, there still hits me from time to time. And one of the things that I think about, and gosh, human minds are funny and sometimes very vicious things. I think about that time and like when Lau would come and want to get some attention from me at 2 o'clock in the morning, because cats don't have anybody's schedule. They're a cat. And Lau would come up and he'd be like, he'd do this thing where, touch my leg like cats do, like, hey, 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 come on, it's my time. And I remember not always being very patient with him. I'd be like, because I
Mm.
was stressed out and I was tired, and I'm like, Lau, get out of here. And like, that's one of those things where I think about. I'm like, yeah, I know I was probably pretty good to him, and I know he felt loved, and I know he felt safe. But why? Why do I have to keep thinking about that, right? And I think about like that's another signal when I find myself being impatient or I guess impatient or borderline unkind to people that I care about because I'm in this space, right? That's also a sign of imbalance, right? That was never part of the narrative before, but recently became part of the
Mm.
narrative as I start to deal with all these other things, all these other
Mm.
feelings, right? Um, but yeah, I think that's one that's come up more recently as well, is this sense of not feeling as present. Like what falls off the plate when I start feeling out of balance? Self care falls off there, and then after that becomes personal relationships. I notice that I start saying, "Hey, sorry I couldn't make it to this thing today. I know we had this agreement to do this thing. I can't make it because all these other things piled up, and I got to put out fires. I have to do all these other things that I put on my to do list that I shouldn't have." Or maybe snowball effect. I said I missed the deadline on one thing, and now everything starts snowballing. However it happens, I find myself in a situation where suddenly, like, I don't get to go mini golfing, and I have to say no repeatedly to people who are giving me a signal that, hey, we're here, we want to participate in your life, right? And I want to
Mm.
participate in their lives, but I can't. Or rather, I'm not allowing myself to, right?
Mm.
So that's a sign of imbalance too. When I notice that, um, when I start to miss people that I'm really close to, right? Or I find myself having to like spend a lot of time catching up with people. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want this to sound too much like a Hallmark made for TV movie, but I mean, that's part of the way to keep yourself healthy is through emotional connections to other people, right?
Mm. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, and if in your experience you hadn't had the benefit of feeling that kind of connection before, you may not notice it missing, and or you may not have the vocabulary for it or the familiarity to like say, well, wait a minute, this is what I think I need to act on, and this is um, like I'm not hearing a Lifetime movie. I'm hearing the what was it? Um, there's a big picture, right? I mean, so we are, uh, we are we're beings with stories, and we have a beginning, we have a middle, we have a progression, and all that stuff, and then we have an end, right?
Yeah.
Um, and this is something that, depending on the age of whoever I'm talking with about it, they may like change the topic right away, right? I did not put this in the show notes, but
Right.
like, I was reading. There's an exercise in the book, "The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People" by Stephen R. Covey, and I mean, to whatever end, like management culture and business philosophy and hocus pocus, some of it, right? But some of it's like it's based on psychology or whatever, or at least interesting insights from a caring perspective, whatever. But like one of the stories in that book had to do with go through the mental exercise of you're attending a funeral, and then you see that it's your picture on the board, and then you need to give yourself your own eulogy, right? What do you have wanted to have accomplished, and what do you want that to be like, whatever. That's like a pretty wide, bigger perspective to reframe this stuff. And it makes, and it's funny because like jumping there to me creates another pressure, because then it's like, aha, I'm only important guy. Guess what? If this isn't the big picture, then I'm not doing it or whatever, right? Like, things like, I don't know, like silly details of that seem silly at first, like I don't know, caring about like an organized place or whatever. I mean, it's like, well, I'm only working on my big mission project or whatever, right? So you can justify that, or you can justify easily. Like rationalizing is it's simple to misassign things and and to like give too big of a weight to one perspective or another. And like even when you're trying to put things in a big picture, even when you're saying like, well, we should appreciate things when they're here, right? And appreciate beings when they're with us and all that, which I get from the tale of your experience with
Yeah,
Lyle.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And but I also get that from like being a parent, like this is the time when they are growing and managing roles and expectations of like, well, I am a person who has a lot of practice doing side project things, and my nature and how I engage with those things is utterly different for before kids and then after kids. And it's not that it's gone. It's not that but it's different. Like on so many levels, and maybe we can end up picking at some of those things, but it's funny that the
well, I'm curious. I'm curious at digging at that actually,
yeah,
like
go ahead.
because I am of the two of us. I'm the one without children. You were the one with children. I would love it if you could speak to that. No, that's not to place any kind of value judgment of where we fall in a perspective, but more of that perspective should be spoken to because probably a good number of people who are listening do have children or will have children, what does that look like when it's out of balance when you're a parent? Because I'm talking about yelling at a cat,
Oh,
who I love very much, but it's still I'm yelling at a cat. I'm not yelling at a child.
well, I mean, this are the stakes higher? Sure, maybe, right?
Most people would say so, I would
Maybe.
imagine.
And I say stakes higher as far as like your interactions may have repercussions as far as the cat's Lao's experience, right? But like, it's not like it's a direct species thing, right? Where it's
Right.
like your
Right.
companions, but the nature of that companionship is different, right? And um, you coexist and there's meaningful interaction and whatnot. Whereas, kids are sort of these ever evolving learning machines, as I hope we all are, right? But like especially growing up, you're picking up new patterns and looking for them and all that. And there's it's like everything I do, I know I'm teaching them whether I intend to or not, right? Because I could
Right.
think like, well, you know what? I'm in a professional context, and this seems to come like if like let's say I'm with a client, and I think this might be a useful time to bring up like a cognitive walkthrough to gain new perspective on what we're working on or whatever. That's an active choice, right? It's just always there when you're living with a kid, right? There isn't like the active choice to be a teacher. You're just always, right? So, um, so then, what it looks like as far as when things go wrong, it's like, um, it's so funny, the sort of day-to-day hectic schedule. Just think of the workflow of like, well, there's a time when everyone wakes up and needs to get to their situations, their commitments, their whether it is a preschool or a primary school or it's a day job and whatever. And if you have that's a couple of adults, couple kids, and then with the adults have the expectation and practice of like, well, this is what we need to do by a certain time, and you get ready. But like kids getting ready, there's no like if you had to put shoes on your cat, um, that might be you might approach some of the tensions that right where
Right. Right. Yes. Yes. When it's time for Maggie's medicine or it's time to trim her nails, then yes,
yep,
because
there's a need.
there's a need, and there's no me saying to her, well, look, if you just calm down and just sit here for a second, it'll be over before you know it. That's not what Maggie hears.
And that's so it looks like this sort of balancing act of managing my own tension to be like, well, we just got to get through this, to like saying like, you just have a totally different life experience and I want our mornings to be great, like this should be fun. And how do we navigate that and make it work in a way that's compatible for all of us? And some mornings I feel like I deal with that well, and other mornings it's like, come on, and then way more serious, right? And is that that it's tough because I think I can argue both sides where I end up saying to myself where it's like, yeah, I kind of was I was annoyed. I was clearly annoyed and impatient, right? But yet also that's a feedback mechanism. It's good to know, for them to sort of plug in and notice and see that there's kind of a natural consequence to doing things and not doing things and what have you. And you're hearing a bunch of I tend to parent through natural consequence and coaching. That's a huge, just a personal belief. And so it means like I may be really obviously easily you're able to notice I'm having a way harder time than when it's going well. And to the extent where I'll try to adapt, like we had an art, I did not put this in the show notes. We had an art and science punks on like one of the key adaptations that I and Kate came up with called Teamwork and Hustle, where I'm like, this has got to change. And how do we make it fun and meaningful, where it's like, well, your choices as a being matter, and I don't care what age you are. It's just like your appreciation and understanding of that's going to change over time. And so I'm going to create this feedback mechanism. There you go, teamwork and hustle.
Okay.
So anyway, so it looks like that. It looks like throwing adaptations at it. It looks like being exasperated. It looks like all sorts of things.
But you used some keywords that I want to jump on there. You said this has to change. There's a moment where you say this has to change. This can't go on. How do you know? Like, I mean, there's obviously there's a point when our brains say that to us, right? However, there's also a point when my brain sometimes says to me like, "Oh, here we go again." Where the exasperated C-3PO voice pops up in my head. It's like we were made to suffer. But like this has to change is sort of like there's an empowerment in that statement. Like, okay, this has to change, and I'm going to do something about it, which suggests to me that there's some kind of observation happening, some kind of monitoring the situation to look for what are the fulcrum points where you can push things to make things change. What does that look like for you? How do you find that where the point when this has to change and what you can do about it?
How do I find the point? I think it's probably an expectation and a noticeable concern that that I believe is important. Where for me it was that our mornings suck, and I know they can be better. I just know it. Like there's totally a way to do this better, and let's try this other thing. And that thing like started out, and it's morphed over time, but it's been this but fundamentally this reframing of a feedback loop of, and if I forget what episode of Art and Science Punks, but yeah, Kate and I outlined that because again, like this is this whole topic of like the balancing work and life and family and all that.
Oh, it was episode 19.
Oh, there you go.
I'll put it in the show notes, but
Thanks.
it's at artsciencepunks.fireside.fm/19 game design for teamwork and hustle.
I think recovering from high stressful times helps too, where you're like, well, this has come up like dozens of times in my life at this point, if not hundreds. And what's a common element among all those things is that maybe part of me expected this to not need to get this difficult or what have you, and then realizing that, well, this is getting a little bit on the ground, but like that well, what if I just like part of my practice and experience is just saying like I notice the problem, and emotions are a signal. I'm getting frustrated and having a difficult time. Like probably my immediate choice after this, being really frustrated, is not going to be like my best informed perspective, right? So how do I, and so then, and practicing that kind of thing where like teamwork and hustle didn't come out of like nowhere, it came out of practicing a bunch of things. And honestly, being a game designer too, was a huge part of it.
I want to underline something you just said there that I think is really important, is that the decision you make right after feeling the feeling is not necessarily going to be the best decision to deal with the situation, right? What you're describing, and this is on the ground type of stuff, I think, what you're describing is creating somehow a space in order to let those ideas take form, right? Whether it's through some kind of collection of information, and then like a repeated, we've talked about this 100 times in the show, journaling of some sort or some kind of way to collect what's actually happening, and then reflecting on that after the fact somehow. But there's a difference between collecting and reflecting and then just reacting. And I think that's where things changed for me a lot, was when I was reacting all the time and just accepting that, well, this is this is what you do. You just panic at the last minute, and you stay up all night. You pull up an all-nighter to make the thing happen. That's the life that I chose as an artist, right?
Yeah.
Versus saying like, well, I can't do that forever. There's got to be another way to approach this thing. There's got to be a way to like safeguard against some of these panic moments. Um, let's look at what's really happening here. Let's try to capture it as much as we can while we're doing it, so that we have some kind of a better way to make an informed choice and give ourselves the space to make a decision about what to do about it. Yes, I'm feeling something right now. Yes, I'm panicked. Yes, I'm really stressed out. Me trying to fix it right now is not going to help anybody. But if I give myself a couple weeks and let this stuff sit and digest a little bit, maybe I'll come out the other side with some kind of perspective that can actually, right?
Well, yeah, any kind of distance from that initial emotional impact, right? Where like that's the classic phrase, sleeping on it. So sleep on a concern, and see how your perspective with a little bit of distance at least is maybe ready to do some useful exploration, and then noticing those different things is this is where I think the systemic approaches to sort of managing your life stuff, whether it's something you totally grew yourself, where you're like, well, I like to think of my life as, mind, body, spirit. I like to think of my life as friends, family, finances, or, pick however you end up making, finding and assigning jobs to buckets and how you manage them or whatever. I mean, you come up with these things, and then you consider your time and your effort and expectations, like goals or outcomes or whatever. They get themed by these buckets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's and that's something that just on the ground. I mean, I've experimented with a lot. Like even in my teens, I would write stuff down a lot. Just I was really disorganized about it, because I would have crumpled up pieces of paper of like I don't know how many different shapes and sizes. I would have a napkin, a placemat, a bit of cash register tape, and whatever, right? And this is where my my outboard brain would be, and I'd be like, well, what was I trying to plan to manage? And so I've been practicing that over time, and it's and even when you feel supremely confident, like I've thought of all the things I want to do this week, this month, this year, whatever, the 5-year plan, who knows, right? Or even if you've written your own eulogy, right? And you intend to be like, 200 years old. There's that whole thing meets day-to-day, moment-to-moment circumstance, and it becomes a new thing, a new way to generate tension, depending on how you relate to it. Right. Where I'm like, I thought I would get blank done in this, unreasonable amount of time, and then or whatever. Or I thought I could get blank done without sleep. Or I thought, all sorts of silly things
that was an initial tension when I began actually tracking things and carefully observing what I was doing. Like, is that like without the context of knowing what I was actually capable of course, my eyes were bigger than my stomach, to use the tired old expression. Of course, I was approaching things with this perspective-free sense of what my capabilities were. And that's...
that could be a great T-shirt right there, right? And I'm picturing like a couple mountains and a silhouette of someone throwing a fishing line.
Yeah,
like that's a nice T-shirt.
A perspective-free a sense of what my capabilities are.
Yes.
But I want to point people also, while we're on this topic, because I think there's a related thing from our friend Brandon Dayton. And if you haven't subscribed to his YouTube channel yet, you should. It's just Brandon Dayton on YouTube, but we'll link to it in the show notes. He did a new episode called The Secret to Productivity, and his series is basically you just watch him draw while he talks about the philosophy of art. And the latest one, he talks about the secret to productivity. And one of the things he talks about is like he uses an ATP, and he noticed that when he worked from home, he was less productive than when he worked out, like in the shared office space. So he began working in a shared office space because the simple perspective shift of I'm leaving the house now, right, was enough. And that was a thing that's like maybe specific to him or specific to a small group of people or a specific group of people, but it was something that he noticed through watching and tracking his stuff. Um, and he was able to make that change as a result, right?
That is okay. What I think is valuable about what you said is like every single bit of it, and I think it's worth pointing out that lack of experience is also a valuable, important asset that um, it's easy to try to like, well, okay, we're mining our experience and we're pointing out lessons and hopefully things that are helpful. Here's some context, some things where we ran into the difficulty of being out of balance or what have you. It's not, who knows, perhaps you know, everyone's mileage varies, and you may not encounter these tensions or forces or design constraints in the same way that we're describing. And the like fresh perspective and not having the experience is incredibly valuable too. And hopefully what is being projected through what we're saying is it's not, let's see, it's a beneficial thing to encounter and explore. And I don't know if it's avoidable to like just, you know, you get your own, you know, you encounter your own challenges there, right? Where like maybe for you, you've always thought like, well, of course I get lots of sleep. What are you talking about? I know lots of people who are like they've never encountered that area of concern. Yet for me, I've encountered it a lot. Or other folks who are like, well, of course I make time to drink tea and relax every afternoon or whatever. I mean, like that's an of course. You like I may have my of courses. You probably have your own of courses, and you know, I think that whole openness to all the points of that, like you describing Brandon's experience, right? It's like it's easy to try to convey, like, not that we're doing this, but like I've recently become more sensitive to I might be presenting information in a way that is assuming that or coming off in a way that like having lots of time doing a thing is where all the good stuff comes from, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no way. Like it can come at any point along
Yeah, it can, and
your
it's
experience.
it's really surprising how it's a mix of the. For me, it's a mix of the things. Like there's good stuff that comes out of a 5 hour block. There's good stuff that comes out of a week of 20-minute intervals, right? Um,
So funny. Yeah.
yeah. Caleb is in the chat, and earlier Caleb was talking about like one of the signals of imbalance for me personally, because I know Caleb, and 6 years ago he asked me to play a game called Portal, and I said I will. I swear I will. And it's 6 years later, and I still haven't played it because it's just like blocking out that little bit of time to like play a game is so hard. But then Caleb recently went to college, and he says for school I didn't plan much, or maybe he's talking about high school. I'm not sure. But for school I didn't plan much other than what I had to do.
Hmm.
But I tracked what I did do on top of that, and so that was basically learning how much time doing work takes. Um, Invaluable. Absolutely invaluable, because I mean our brains are funny things, and flow state is it's a wonderful untrustworthy thing where you don't know how much time has passed until it's too late, and then you don't even know what happened in that time, you know. At least that's my experience.
That's a funny side effect. Yeah, really good point of like beware of flow, and
Yeah.
also flow is great. um, because but yeah, that kind of capturing the observations in some form, just so that like I mean some folks you encounter them and they've got like a great recollection of timing and circumstance, right? For me, I really enjoy the benefit of like having a lot of notes, and so I like to take notes throughout my day. Um, and then because I review those notes, um, I reconnect and I learn a ton of stuff. And like without that, it would be hard to gain, to gain those insights. And like what you described Caleb doing, it's in. I think honestly, like everyone probably has some form of journaling they would probably benefit from,
Yeah.
and that's whatever. That's a very much lean into it thing.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's something we both feel very strongly about. I mean, there's a lot of benefits that come out of it, and it's by no means. I don't want to describe it or have anybody misunderstand me as describing it as a panacea. Of wow, if feeling stresses in your life, your personal life not balanced with your work life, just start writing things down and everything. That's not. It's not just that simple, but added perspective. Boy, does it help arm you for. It helps you find those this has to change moments.
Well, okay. So if you are going to form a system of saying like, you know what, I notice a trend. I notice that this comes up a lot. Well, make that part of your approach. That the grow your own systemic approach thing, and or if you're like, well, I don't know, I'm not comfortable thinking in systems, you can shop for and try out an existing system like GTD. It's not bad, getting
Oh,
things
you're talking
done.
about getting things done. Let me pull
Yeah,
that up.
that's a fine system, and you may find that it's great. You've moved in. That's where you're going to stay, or you might say, you know what? All right, I have a taste for it, and now you're ready to make your own.
Also, I think of our friend Jonathan Rector, who was playing around with the Pomodoro Method a while back, which is 20-minute increments, I think. Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's this whole you set a timer. It's probably 20, 25 minutes, and then you give yourself some number of minutes as a break after that. But you commit to you're going to focus on a given task during that chunk of time, or it's like a series of tasks in that chunk of time of where you're immersed in the Pomodoro, and then timer goes off, and you lived up to focusing and cranking on that commitment, then you reward yourself. And overall, with how our brains work, positive reinforcement is a powerful thing. See games like Warcraft and honestly, anything Blizzard has designed in the last 15 years. Things like Diablo and let's see. Look at free-to-play games, and like whole positive reinforcement through some kind of systemic progression. It's a pretty big thing. It's just a matter of like designing your own Diablo to be like your how you shape your tasks and stuff.
Hmm. Well, I think there's a lot of different ways, and like you said, you could grow your own, and there's also pre-made systems. There's systems that you can hack and modify. Yeah, and then there's also software solutions. Like we've talked about Trello before on the show, and there's other things like Airtable. There's what are some of the other ones? Nosby. Trying to think.
All sorts of good stuff that we have talked about, which
Yeah.
makes me think, like, okay, so
Drop Task. There's another one.
oh, nice. If we need to, like, this sounds kind of hard. Like, is if it's all boiling down to like this balance really come through this task management, and like, I don't know how does like why do we even why do we think about this stuff? What might be a
We're getting there. We got to talk about feelings.
Yeah.
We got to talk about the thinking that we do.
Yeah.
We'll round out this close. Caleb just used his method in here, while we're throwing a bunch of methods into a giant pot. He said another thing I figured out as working is fine-grained in-text to-do lists. So he uses an editor where he can search for to-do notes, and he writes I write the as at sign to do colon at topic, etc. And then when I get stuck on something, I just drop a to-do list. So yeah, it could be something as simple as a text editor, right? Doesn't have to be anything super fancy that you pay a lot of money for, and it can be fine-grained, as fine-grained as you want it to be. All right, so how about we get into talking about like the abstract thinking stuff, Rob?
Yeah, exactly. This is
Oh, did I just lose you?
a moment,
Oh, okay.
right? Because
Yes, I lost your audio for a second there, so I missed exactly what you said. But
oh, funny.
so,
Oh yeah, so time to go 10,000 feet up in a moment after we explore this, this little break. We need to thank some people, right?
yes, let's thank some people who make this show possible, and those people happen to be the folks who support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/leanintoart is where you can find our page. And what is it? It's an ongoing funding campaign. It's a way for you, if you believe in the stuff we do, if you think that it's worth your time, and if you find it useful, or if it makes you happy, if it's something you like to run in the background, you can pledge as little as $1 a month to say, like, hey, we believe in you, we believe in the stuff you make, and we hope that you'll keep making it. And there are 5 people that we want to thank who have been doing exactly that. Let's name them right now. How about Rachel Ross? Rachel, oh my gosh, Rachel, at NYCTERIS. So it's like New York City Terrace. Thank you, Rachel, for your support. Been a long-time supporter of the show. Casey Snipes, at KC Snipes on Twitter. By the way, I'm shouting out Twitter handles right now, if I didn't say that before. Letter K, letter C, Snipes on Twitter. Thank you, Casey, for making the show more sustainable. Catherine Sugru, Cat, K-A-T, Sue, S-O-O, Gru, as in Gru the Wanderer, G-R-O-O, on Twitter. Thank you, Catherine. Marshall Kocher, at Marshall Kocher. That's Marshall with 2 L's, and Kocher, C-O-U-T-U-R-E. These will all be linked in the show notes. And finally, Olivia Birdton. Olivia Birdton on Twitter. Thank you, everybody who has been supporting us on the show. And if you decide that you want to check out patreon.com/leanintoart, you will find the extra lean episodes, which are now only for Patreon supporters, where we record an extra show once a month. And then you can engage with us there, where only people who support the show can comment and post there. Right, Rob?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's a way to, if you want to sort of get that extra access to us and sort of pick our brains, but in honestly, a safe space. I mean, you're among other leaners who are just a really, a thoughtful, creative group that's, pretty fun to see how they respond to what you share, and we love to learn and respond to what you share there. Either way, I mean, you totally benefit from. There's a couple of free things you get when you sign up, and then also those extra lean episodes. And either way, what you're doing is you're essentially putting that vote out there, saying like, you know what, I want this to keep going. I believe in this. We'll share some other thoughts on how you can support this with that sort of vote later on in the episode.
Here we go. So it's time to go 10,000 feet up for just a little while. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
3, 2, 1, contact!
And now we're 10,000 feet up, where we think about the thoughts that we think while we engage with this topic. So why even think about this stuff, Rob? Aren't we just giving ourselves a lot of busy work?
Well, yeah, exactly. Because I mean, you can say that, well, I'm an artist. I'm creative, and whatever I do is based on impulse and inspiration, whatever. Or you know what? I like to think stuff through, but like I'm battling my own humanity because I can't remember stuff, and even when I do remember it, it's filtered based on like how I like to see the world. Like so, how do I manage around that? And then okay.
I finished the thing, so I must have done it right.
Oh yeah, exactly. I survived a really hard deadline with tight constraints in a variety of things, and I did it, so you can too. I'm a survivor.
I am so guilty of that.
Mm. Oh, I'm super guilty of that. Like, survivor bias is a thing that can seem very generous, yet can have negative side effects too, right? Where it's like, you can be like, well, I've been through this. I think you can do this too, and we're all at different positions, whatever. And it's easy to sort of gloss over stuff. I think is kind of a banner in this section. Yeah. So what do we, let's see. So we were thinking a little bit about the systemic approaches and the nature of how, like, that can be a very individual thing, like your own system. And that, we've got we have our biases where we're like, okay, if you're going to face these things, you're going to face the imbalances. You're going to be like, gosh, I wish I want to have more time to plan this event for my kids. I want to do this other thing, but yet I've got these other commitments, my day job, my, other things. And, or like, I have not published this Polytechnicast, but I was thinking of how, like it's funny. It's really related to today's topic, or maybe it was just prep for this, but it's really, well, aren't my side projects optional? In a way, where do I need to keep this kind of pressure on myself? Is like, why, like, but yet, even though, like, part of me is arguing for maybe this kind of stuff is optional, where I can sort of back off some of the desire to, deliver and do extra things. But gosh darn it, that desire still exists, right? So why even bother with all this? Just sort of suffer, and stuff happens.
Oh, well, I mean, okay. So I make fun of nihilism a little bit, but there's also another way of looking at it, and there is a certain lack of control that one has, right? As they say, stuff happens. But on the other hand, there is a well, I think in your words, right, shaping outcomes adds up over time. And even if it's I can attempt to shape outcomes and not everything goes the way I planned it, these things can either inform the approach for the next thing that I do, or the outcome that happens from this one can affect the beginning of the next thing that I take on, and so on. And there is a sort of control that one can take over this. There's a sort of line in the sand that one can draw. Joseph Coco was in the chat asking, like, do we put fun times on our to-do list? Do we mandate certain activities? And, like, yeah, as a matter of fact, there are certain things where it's like, these are things that I'm time boxing 30 minutes here or an hour there, and that's me. And that's not like, oh, it's me time. I'm gonna go put cucumbers on my eyes. Although if I wanted to, I would. But it's a way to say, like, I need these little blocks to recharge and reassess and give myself that mental space to be able to more effectively do the work that I do. And that came through watching, monitoring, and collecting information and reflecting on it, so that I knew where I could put that. And noticing where the imbalances happened. Oh, isn't it funny? The imbalance happened right after 3 weeks of me not doing any of these personal activities, right?
Mm.
Um,
Without the observations, it's a lot harder to make the decisions. You can feel supremely confident that you are infinitely in touch with all the experiences of your past, yet probably it's not as perfect as you're assuming. Even if like you're really awesome at it, you might be super awesome at that. There's likely some little piece of data that's worth keeping track of. Um, even if it comes in the form of like it doesn't really look like um, highly measurable. It's just, well, I thought about stuff over time and I wrote that down. But then if you review it, you go back and it sort of becomes this sort of revealing of how did you look at that day that you had a lot on, like, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't one day. That was, 3 weeks of just one thing. That was your primary task from waking up in the morning to going to bed or whatever.
Yeah.
You're going to get something out of that.
Yeah.
That it's easy to dismiss. Like, how did you not dismiss it or whatever? Like, why did you start picking up that kind of like
So
put something down?
I know I've told the story of the man in the werewolf mask memory, right? Or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like where Ann and I, like I have a very clear memory of October 1990. It was almost Halloween, or it was Halloween. It was Halloween. I was walking home from school. I had a really good day, and a car pulled up to an intersection. And the guy driving the car was wearing a werewolf mask. He turned and he waved to me, and it wasn't at all creepy like a Stanley Kubrick movie. It was not The Shining. It was like this really cheerful moment where I was like, what a funny world we live in, and I kept walking. Ann insists that that is her memory. And it's like through either my telling it or her telling it over and over the years, now we both have the memory as if it really happened to us, and it feels absolutely real, but now I have no idea, right? So like that's one of the reasons, that was one of the signals that like, hey, memory's not that trustworthy. maybe I need some other information in order to be able to make better decisions. So yeah, why think about this stuff? Because it's a way to be more mindful and to be able to monitor myself when I'm not monitoring myself. And again, going back to that flow state thing, getting lost in the work is a wonderful, wonderful experience. That's part of the reason I love it so much. But it comes at a price in that suddenly it's like, oh, I just came out of flow state and now my blood sugar is really low and I got to go to the bathroom. Boy, it would have been nice to attend to those things earlier before it became a problem,
Yeah, that is funny. Like being in a flow state is it sounds poetic when you say the dancer becomes the dance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yet that dancer can be you drawing for a very long time and not noticing side effects of posture and stuff. And all
Or
of a
okay,
sudden,
let's look at it the less romantic way. Also, when I notice that I happen to be cursing under my breath a lot, or I very impatiently tell somebody like, "Look, I don't really have time for this right now," like that kind of thing. Like when I notice I'm snapping at people, or I notice that when I'm driving to class, I'm dreading going to class, and I'm dreading going to talk to kids about comics. What kind of privileged life am I leading? Where it's like, oh, I gotta go talk to some kids about comics for an hour and get paid to do it. Oh, my life is terrible. Those kinds of signals. And like it's like and Caleb's asking in the chat like, what kind of things do I have in those recharging blocks like right now? One of those things is physical exercise, because it is a time for me to get away and disengage from the work and let my brain just focus on breathing for a little while, because when I'm running, all I can think about is I can't breathe. So, but one of the things that the app that I use, Runkeeper, in order to track this, is every time you run, it says, how'd you feel about this? Here's a bunch of smiley faces. Here's a sad face all the way to happy face, right? And guess what? Now I have information that I'm collecting of like, wow, I notice that when I only go run 3 times a week, the face tends to be very neutral. But when I go more often, it tends to be happier. Funny thing, I wonder why. Oh, well, there was also nice weather that day. Oh, and so on. I have a way of knowing like what my capabilities are, a better sense of my capabilities are through that. I don't know. Is that I'm worried that this is borderline anal retentive to be so focused on cataloging one's experience.
Oh, data everywhere. Like, well, you don't have to, but like just even like going from like never capturing anything to like capturing something
Yeah.
is a giant leap in capability. And you know what? Go ahead and, email us, write, tweet at us if you don't feel the same, or do feel the same. Like, because there is a point where it's like, well, the capturing data, like this is a good idea and I want to capture more. It's like how much, like how many calories and weight, and like you can do the whole, like whatever that whole, quantified, existence. And some folks do like really huge share outs of that kind of stuff year after year, which is interesting and, fascinating. But it isn't like you only gain benefit when you're at the extreme. You can gain a lot of benefit just by, being at the minimum, capturing your thoughts once in a while. But like, I also want to circle back to Caleb's question too.
Please, what kind of things are you putting in there?
So a recharging block for me, super funny, is I think a signal that it's worth exploring and questioning and trying stuff is like when you forget what recharging is. So if you've gone for a long time, like doing a lot of deadlines, and this is a little bit what we captured in the last section, but like one of the reasons why I'm doing less sort of like public speaking stuff and less workshops. I'm not trying to do the hustle where I'm like, get them on the calendar, then build the thing and whatever. Because I want more of that flexible space to figure out like what is recharging for me, because I've definitely through my experimenting conflated, and it's not like totally wrong, but like creative projects, the side projects do recharge me a lot, yet also are incomplete. They are not like physical exercise. They are not sort of rewarding general curiosity of the world, which I find just immensely nourishing, right? Like essentially saying like, I'm going to collect some stuff I'm curious about, and then I'm going to, binge some YouTube, Wikipedia, and Khan Academy for a while, right?
Yeah.
I love that. And
Yeah.
but like not having the space for that, and then forget, it's like, so then it's a matter of like figuring out like, okay, I need to figure out what recharging blocks are, and then start to make sure I introduce them into the that sort of like day-to-day, week-to-week commitment set of things.
You want to hear another silly one for me? Is I actually block out a half hour in the afternoons to eat, and to not just, because like a lot of times I'll bring my food into my studio and I'll just sit there eating while I'm working. I'll literally have one hand drawing while I'm eating with my left hand,
Oh yeah.
Which can feel, I don't know, like young me looks at that and is like, that's a guy who's on the move. But now it's like, no, you know what you're gonna do? You're gonna go up, you're gonna sit in your dining room, you're gonna prepare lunch for yourself, and you're gonna sit there and you're gonna eat it quietly, and you're just gonna be alone with your thoughts for a little while. This is a chance for you to like disengage again, and instead of like scarfing things down, you're gonna just like actually like eat a meal like a real person. I can't believe I had to make that decision, but there I am, right? Where I'm like, okay, you're gonna actually eat a meal like a person now. And that's had like a really positive impact on the way I interact with stress now, right? Because I've got at least a couple things that I'm trying every day to stop and let my brain be let it do what it does for a little while.
So I'm wondering if there's a commonality among those things where it's because everyone's mileage varies. Everyone's like, you know what, that kind of lunch isn't going to be the joyful thing. doing more learning. I'm busy learning all the time. That's not going to be my thing. But like what would fill your
Yeah.
blocks would be the stuff that is like optional yet delightful, right? It's
Yeah.
just what's playful and joyful for you. And also thinking of like, well, you like a recharging thing, assuming that recharging is in the it's a mental model. It is a framing, right? To say that this is a weird thing, but like when I'm feeling drained, I sometimes go, well, I think I've been doing something worthwhile. And that then the draining doesn't feel as draining. Because I know that effortful challenge is frequent and persistent through a variety of things that I do. So sometimes it's how I'm looking at it as far as being drained, and other times it's like remembering the things that help me like just avoid feeling drained. And so like for me it's been a little bit of uh, intentionally setting up unintentional exploration, whether it is that learning stuff. It like I literally have no use for it, but like just letting my brain wander like that,
Yep.
I happen to find recharging or yeah.
I've recently in the last year made a semi habit out of letting the YouTube algorithms surprise me, right?
Mm.
So it's like I'll search for, I like Stephen Fry. He says funny things sometimes. I'm gonna search for Stephen Fry and see what comes up. Oh, here now it leads me down this rabbit hole. Here you can either watch some QI episodes where he hosted them, or here's a whole bunch of debates he did with Christopher Hitchens. I never really listened to Christopher Hitchens very much. Let's see what that guy is all about. Here we go down the rabbit hole. Um, yeah, that's a fun recharging block as well. Non intentional yet unintentional learning, exposing myself to stuff for the sake of, I don't know.
It's like going for a mental walk, right?
Yeah.
But then also making sure like, oh, okay, recharging and nourishment can be the same thing. So the other two things are exercise and sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep. Like that is not not particularly fancy or mysterious.
My heuristic for that is like if it's ever something where I'm trying to squeeze it in. So like if I catch myself saying like, can I squeeze in a 15-minute nap here? All right. Well, yes, you can. But that's a signal that you're not getting enough rest somehow, or your body is falling a little bit in disrepair from lack of use. Because let's face it, making comics can be a very sedentary type of job. Um, I'm gonna maybe I won't do a 20-minute and half-hour run today. Maybe I'll do a 15-minute. You're squeezing it in. Let's make the time and let's do it. And so yeah, I know I will watch the latest episode of Voltron while I'm on the treadmill. Then I'm doing two things at once and I'm being extra productive. Well, not there again. You're trying to squeeze things in. That's another signal.
That's a good one. Yeah.
But I think the big one for me to take away this week is when everything's touching everything else.
I love that somehow that painful experience can be of benefit to others.
If only I could send a tachyon message into the brain of young Rob Stenzinger, who's swearing, just painfully, barbarically swearing at his room, that no, there will come a day where a lot of people will get a lot of use out of this experience.
Oh yeah, someday podcasting. So that's cool. I like that thought. I like that reframing. To me, that feels very supportive and reminds me of like sort of support systems as far as dealing with the sort of those tensions and the balance.
Is that what you want to close with?
Yeah.
All right.
What if we explore that as our closing thought?
Closing thought. We were talking about support systems a little bit. Cool. All right, but before we do that, we got to thank some other people who make this project possible, and those people happen to be us. We are the guys who host the show, make the show, put together the notes for the show, and record and discuss the show. And so we also, we talk the talk and walk the walk and whatever other old corny expression you want to roll out for that. So I said I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist. That means that I make comic books. And one of the comics that I make right now that is available to the public, I got a book coming out actually next spring of 2018. But until then, the neat thing you can check out right now is at boulderandfleet.com. And there's a number of stories there, some in black and white, some in color. Right now I have up on the screen at boulderandfleet.com one of the pages from a recent story where our heroes, a bear and a bird, who travel from town to town, and because they say they're adventurers for hire, what's going to happen? They're going to go on adventures. And they get mixed up with these these rock girls who eat precious metals and happen to be raiding or trying to rob a mine mined by these cute little lizard guys who are actually all based on one of those monitor lizards. But yeah, lighthearted comedy and fun at boulderandfleet.com. And if you really enjoy it, you can go check out the Patreon for it at patreon.com/Jerzy. Rob, you make a game.
I make a game, and there is a belief behind that game, and I just want to highlight a belief behind your comic, right? Where, I mean, it's really it's your thesis on like how can you solve problems with pacifism, right?
Right.
It's sort of, maybe have great strength as a capacity, but find different ways to channel that strength besides obvious physical force, yet still have awesome adventures. I mean, what a cool premise. Beautiful premise.
Yeah, that's the goal. I really like dynamic and exciting action adventure stories, but it pains me that the only way the problem is ever solved is by overcoming and defeating a bad person. Even if you're going to do good and evil, let's try to find a way to do it where we don't necessarily punch a person in the face in order to solve the problem.
I find that beautiful and envious, and I'm worried that shall I write a comic again, it'll be punching. Anyway.
I still like stuff with punching. It's just like Avatar: The Last Airbender had a lot of punching in it, and it was very satisfying.
Okay, well, we all have our own. It's awesome. Like, this is a great perspective to add. That is that's underrepresented. So it's awesome. Like, people need to check out boulderandfleet.com and share it with people of all ages. And you know what? Another all ages thing, like you were leading into before, is this game I make called This Panda Needs You. And like you might think, well, why does a panda need me? And it's because, well, there's this sort of puzzle game that deals with physics and pattern matching. And that's what the pandas, just kind of walking around needing your help with. The panda celebrates as you sort of fix things, but why do they go wrong? Well, a cloud shows up, and like, hey, there's a bunch of stacked blocks, whoosh, knocks them all down, and now it's up to you to help the panda put them back to where they were, set things right. And there's like over 50 levels of this, and they get progressively harder and more challenging, and you're dealing with all the physics of all these blocks piled up. How do you organize them and get them stacked to where they were? Starts really easy though, and that's well, I made that because, well, my wife is the co-designer on it, and it was a beautiful idea that she had, where there's a game that, like, kids learning their sort of basic pattern matching skills and sort of early math and shape recognition, and because that's a thing that she's really passionate about, is early childhood education. And I thought, well, this sounds awesome. Turns out lots of people like it, different ages, and you can find out more about that at this-panda.com, and it's available for iPhone and iPad.
And if you are here just because you like the stuff that we talk about and the way we think about things, and you're not as much interested in the stuff we make, fair enough, and no problem, because this is the thing we make too. And we make more stuff like it at leanintoart.com/workshops, where you can download at a price of your choosing a whole bunch of different video workshops that we made, ranging from making comics to making video games to UI, UX design and telling jokes. leanintoart.com/workshops. And if you've already done that, it's like, I've downloaded all your stuff. What else can I do? Well, if you're watching this video on YouTube, you can give it a thumbs up right now. That helps more people find the show, makes it more relevant in search. And also, if you listen to the show as a podcast, like in your favorite podcatcher, whether it's Stitcher, whether it's Overcast, whether it's iTunes, giving the show a rating, a star rating. 5 stars would be really nice. That helps more people discover the show as well. And the more people who discover the show, the more people who can make it sustainable, and so on. It's a good thing all around. And you have more people to talk about or talk with about the show after all. So everybody wins. Okay, and we thank everybody who has supported us by interacting with all of that stuff. It means a lot to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Time for...
Just wrap up thought.
Troy Shadowing Trunks is in the chat. He says, after the falling change jar story, I wonder if there's another reason for this panda needs you. I wonder if there was a psychological underpinning to things falling down and putting them back up again.
We all have experiences that inform our creativity, right?
Right.
And yeah, that's an interesting connection. There was a lot of physics in that moment. And I learned how change jars and laptops don't mix.
And I've seen you curse out clouds like crazy. You hate clouds.
That's true. Those clouds, F them.
More than Grandpa Simpson, 10 times over. So you want to talk about final thought? You want to close up this thing with some talk about support systems? What do you mean support systems?
Yeah, it's kind of a way to expose, well, okay, how do you keep this going? Like what sort of like when you think of support systems that help you work through this sort of that ongoing circumstance, whether it plays out as like a lot of tension or a little bit or whatever. I mean, it's still different buckets of commitments, right? Your primary professional stuff, your side stuff that may also be professional, what have you, and then like family of origin, family of choice. It's a widely wide term. It's like those people and beings that you wish to spend time with and connect.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
What's the support system for that?
I have regular commitments that I make to people. So one of the things is this very thing we're doing right now is I would define it as a support system. Being able to chew on these ideas with you every week is a way for me to, it's a catharsis, and it's a way for me to be reflective on the stuff that I'm making. I also have a buddy who doesn't make comics. He's not an artist. He's just like a fellow enthusiast of the medium and of the types of stuff I love, and we have a weekly commitment. And now there are times when I break that commitment because of different pressures and all those different commitment buckets, but that is a support system where it's like I don't necessarily spill my guts to him every week about like, oh, things are so hard because of this, but being able to talk about Starscream for an hour with a good buddy, it's one of those things that's very it's very relaxing and in its own way nourishing, right? And it helps keep me centered amongst those other things. And then of course, it's like, yeah, the people who are closest to in your life, like my wife, being able to talk with her about these things. But making there are certain things where like there's an aspect to all those where I also make like, okay, every week I'm going to talk with Rob. Every week I'm going to talk with this other friend. Every week, we have certain rituals that we observe, right? So like every Sunday morning, there's this ritual we observe, like in terms of like, oh, we're going to make coffee, we're going to put on this radio show, we're going to do crosswords together for a little while, that kind of thing. Right? So those become, for me at least, a support system. Some kind of there's a necessary regularity to it, I feel.
Those are awesome. Like, I think the like regular, like a support system is sort of, it's almost like your own curated frequent experience playlist where you notice that this helps a lot. I notice that, well, it's like these people, this kind of music, these meals, I get a lot of, I notice that I get a lot of joy out of that. And I make sure that, that I put that stuff in my own path, right? So like, you doing, like finding your own feedback loop and observations, that's a support system. Like finding those rituals that help a lot, that's a support system. Like there's sort of a time frame ability too. Like support systems can be like moment to moment, but it could be yearly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a whole sort of thing that I've found, that I enjoy doing as far as a reflection and an analysis of like the past year and thinking about what I want to do through the next. Totally have podcasted about that here and also on Art and Science Punks. But like, that is a support system. It's a way to sort of build up like a framing and a meaning where it's like, oh, this was a hard day. And then do I just sort of grump and stew in it and stay there? Or am I like, well, okay, why is this meaningful? And, okay, maybe it fits or doesn't fit to what I was, intending to make happen. And then I can, explore it from there. But like that whole thing is a support system.
And some of them can be seasonal, right? It's like there's I can't go bike riding in December in Michigan. Well, I could, but it's tricky.
You need those weird, really cool looking, but like those didn't exist like you got these bikes that look like they could go on the moon, right?
Oh, the big tire bikes, yeah.
Big tire bikes, yeah.
Yeah, like
I don't have a big tire bike.
Yeah, me neither. But like they popped up in the last couple of years, and it's like I see a bunch of people riding them in the winter. I'm like, totally makes sense. Yeah, you want to break out the snow tires, right?
But since you don't have one, it's not an option, really.
Right.
So what do
going
you do?
for walks in the woods becomes a trickier challenge when there's 4 feet of snow on the ground, right?
So sometimes your support system swaps out.
Yes, sometimes
okay.
It changes. It changes. It swaps out is a good way to put it. It changes hands with something else.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. I mean, so and I agree. Like the people are huge, right? So yeah, I mean, this clearly podcasting is a support system for me, and clearly like and in my goals, which is a support system, I try to set myself up with other support systems, right? That I know that I've got some sort of longer term creative projects that have infrequent sharing publicly, right? So how do I get that sort of that connection and ongoing whatever? Well, I make sure I have got ones that are easier to experience that frequency, right? So and I know like that helps me in for what I because I notice like what seems to feel helpful, worthwhile. I get that some positive signal from. So that tends to be stuff that I will elect into some form of support system. Yep.
I think we walked around it, Rob.
I think we did. Thank you for the initial question. It came up, and I think sort of one of our extra leans, right? So it was a great question. And it was requested like, hey, you could tackle this as an episode. So thank you for that question. You know who you are.
Yeah, and it was timely too because I needed this as a a step back and a perspective, taking a perspective breath as I engage with the final throes of a deadline before leaping into another one. I'm gonna have to block out some time for collecting my thoughts on what just happened before I go do it again,
So, I mean, gosh, so many ways to that recharge extra question. It's almost like this extra element to the whole podcast because it's like, warm bath, watching a comedy, whatever, you know what I mean? Like so many things that comfort food, entertainment, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, the Harry Potter audiobook series, right? Just okay.
I found on YouTube.
So comfortable.
I found on YouTube a reading of the Silmarillion by I always blank on his name, Count Dooku, Saruman.
Christopher
Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was on one of my little excursions where I was just like, okay, YouTube, tell me what you think I like, and it's like, hey, you probably like this. I'm like, you're right, I do.
That's awesome.
Christopher Lee reading the Silmarillion. That's great. So yeah, talk about comfort food. But it was like undiscovered comfort food. Anyway, but yeah, that's a whole episode we could do down the road. We should get some guests on for that too. I'd be really interested in hearing what some of our friends think about that kind of stuff. But in the meantime, we'll be back in another week, and the show will be archived at leanintoart.com and patreon.com/leanintoart. And we thank you once again for downloading, listening. Oh, Caleb Jones says Steven Universe is my comfort media. Yes, Steven Universe is fabulous. And that's another show, that's another story where you have a hero who solves dangerous problems through caring a lot. At least, well, as far as I've gotten, Caleb, I'm only about a season and a half in. So, but from what I've seen so far, it's like Steven cares a lot about people, and that motivation leads him to solutions that usually doesn't involve him blasting somebody to smithereens. Anyway, okay, so yeah, we'll be back in a week, and thanks everybody for downloading, listening, and watching. And until next time, I've been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy on Twitter.
And I have been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. See you, Caleb. See you,
Yeah,
see you,
thank you
Troy.
for hanging out.
See you, Joseph.